welcome back to Sorkin Talking, and this is Reveal 0002, and it's a continuation obviously of the last episode, which was talking about basic needs for all as a birthright, not as a privilege. And I'm going to endeavour to unpack that a little bit more here. Now, essentially, what the premise is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle that I was explaining to you, how we reach self-actualization and how we can reinstate the power of the masses into the position of authority. Well, my theory is this, that we humans, society, both on a local, national, international and global stage, have been under attack by systems designed to serve us have been hijacked. There's been a mutiny, and those systems no longer represent the masses. It's a dictatorship. We're being told the system is there to protect us, but ultimately it doesn't have our best interests at heart, because it's a power structure. The few have the power, but the majority should have the authority and the power. Mutiny. Let's talk about mutiny. Well, in this context, it isn't about sailors and sabers. It's about systems breaking their mandates, our mandates. A system designed with a service contract reduce friction, increase safety, create order, deliver value. Now, mutiny happens when that system flips incentives, forgets its purpose, and starts optimizing for its own survival instead of human outcomes. Think of it as an internal coup. The tool stops serving the user and starts managing the user. That's us. So at first it's subtle, extra steps for your protection, metrics that quietly replace meaning, compliance over common sense. The language changes too. People become inputs, behavior becomes risk, and dissent becomes noise. And that's to tell when a system treats the humans it was built for as a threat to be contained. The mutiny is already underway. This isn't malice. It's misalignment at scale. Systems don't wake up evil. They drift there when feedback loops reward control over care, efficiency over wisdom, and growth over truth. Bureaucracy metastasizes, automation hardens, policy outlives purpose, and the map starts arguing with the territory and begins to win. Now, from a governance lens, mutiny is when accountability flows upwards while consequences flow downwards. Remember what I was talking about with the pyramid? Now, from a psychological lens, it's learned helplessness, engineered by process. From a strategic lens, it's technical debt turning into moral debt. A mutinous system enforces obedience where it's meant to enable freedom, extracts value where it was meant to distribute it, and punishes deviation where it was meant to adapt. That's not a bug. That's a system that has decided it is the product and you are the obstacle. Now, for argument's sake, let's look at the broken world systems at local level, those that attack our opportunity and efforts to achieve the first level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as I explained on the pyramid. Now, here's the clean, boardroom-ready argument. No incense, no theatrics, just casual logic, okay? Broken world systems don't only fail at the top, they cascade damage downward. And at the local level, they actively obstruct humanity's most basic requirement, survival. Maslow's first tier, food, water, shelter, sleep, bodily safety, is not aspirational, it's operational. Without it, this is serious business. Nothing else runs. When local systems interfere here, they are no longer merely inefficient, they are hostile to life outcomes. Now, the core argument is this. Local systems increasingly monetize access, bureaucratize survival, and criminalize instability, turning basic human needs into conditional privileges rather than guaranteed foundations. Take housing. Local planning rules, zoning constraints, licensing regimes, and compliance costs are framed as standards. Yet their net effect is artificial scarcity. Shelter becomes a financial instrument before it is a human necessity. People don't fail to secure housing because they lack effort. They fail because the system prices survival above earning capacity. That's not market dynamics. That's structural exclusion. Take food. At local level, access is shaped by supply chains, pricing policy, taxation, and regulation. When fresh food costs more than ultra-processed calories, the system isn't neutral. It's steering behavior. Hunger doesn't arise from laziness. It arises from engineered affordability gaps. And the body keeps the score, and the bill lands on the poor. Take work. Entry-level employment, micro-enterprise and informal labour, historically speaking, the on-ramp to survival, are increasingly strangled by permits, fees, insurance requirements, digital systems and compliance overheads. The message is paradoxical. Be self-sufficient, but only through approved channels. You can't access without already being stable. That's a catch-22 dressed up as responsibility. Take safety and rest. Noise, overcrowding, unstable housing, shift work, volatility, and punitive enforcement regimes all degrade sleep and nervous system regulation. A dysregulated body cannot plan, learn, or innovate when systems keep people in constant physiological stress. They quietly destroy the very agency they later demand. The pattern is consistent. Complexity replaces care. Processes replace purpose. Rules outlive reality. Local systems don't just fail to support Maslow's first level. They actively tax it financially, cognitively, and emotionally. And here's the uncomfortable truth executives avoid. When people are trapped and too exhausted to challenge the structure, whether intentional or not, the outcome is the same: dependency masquerading as order. So the argument isn't that individuals aren't trying hard enough. The argument is that systems designed to serve have drifted into mutiny, enforcing conditions that undermine the biological prerequisites of human function, for human function. When survival itself becomes a compliance exercise, the system is no longer broken. It's misaligned with humanity. That's not a moral failure alone. That's a design failure with predictable consequences. Okay, so let's wrap this up and ask the question, what solutions do we have to counter the attack spoken of here? And in one way, to provide basic needs as a birthright, not as a privilege, to the masses. In essence, how to circumnavigate the current globalists' agenda and corporation systems headed up by game theory that's been going on for many decades now, guiding people into making the decisions that we don't actually really want or back as a community. Of course, all of this as well without breaking the law or becoming a target and being locked up for speaking the truth or for wanting something that doesn't suit the corporation and the globalist narrative? Well, here's a wrapped, framed answer that we could sort of start thinking about. Maybe you can add your own to that. Certainly in the comments, please do. Okay, well, first we need to ask the question, how do we provide basic needs as a birthright, not as a privilege, within that law, the legal system, the broken rule of law that politics has become in Western civilization, aka the Commonwealth? Well, if systems have, as we've talked about, as I've talked about, drifted into mutiny, the response isn't chaos, it's parallel alignment. The solution is not to overthrow existing structures, but to root around the failure modes, legally, locally, and incrementally, until they are no longer gatekeepers of survival. Those that are rolling out agendas that are affecting us and our access to basic needs as the standard for accessing the pyramid. This is not rebellion, it's design correction. We're redesigning a system that, okay, in many parts, the function or the setup is going to serve us. But we need to just redesign it now because it's gone too far towards serving the few as opposed to the masses. So the first principle is redefine the baseline. And according to Abraham Maslow, his hierarchy of needs, the physiological needs are the foundation of all human function. Treating food, shelter, water, rest, and safety as conditional rewards breaks the system upstream. So the correction starts with a reframing. Basic needs are infrastructure, not charity, which is how they've got us believing it should be. We either have to attain a certain level in society or grab that carrot on a stick to get that freedom that is offered to us through the basic needs model. And we're given the illusion that we live in scarcity when we live in a world of abundance. The roads aren't earned, by the way, and neither should survival be. This should be a basic human right. And you hear this, human rights. Well, not in the context of the UN version, because a human right is, you could say it's your human right to have the Bank of England emptied and all the money delivered to your house. Well, no, it's not. and I obviously disagree. So it's subjective. So we can't really work along those lines of people's opinions and subjectivity around what basic needs are. We need a model to refer back to. This is why I always come back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So with that said, the second principle, decentralized provision, not authority. What does this mean? Well, globalist and corporate systems dominate because they centralize supply chains. The lawful counter is local redundancy, taking back those elements of control on a local level. And I know we've tried over the years. I myself did in the early 90s, tried to create buy-in pods of local businesses specific to their needs for running their business, say grocery stores buying in bulk to reduce the cost of purchasing from the manufacturer. There's one example. Another is community food co-ops, which is along these lines. Local agriculture being supported instead of those rights and privileges for farmers to farmland being taken away. Shared kitchens. Is this such a mad idea that some people have that ability to feed more, want to feed more, have the opportunity to do that, and maybe given the funds and the resources, that would be something that we could do. Have a community that feeds the community. Water capture, repair cafes where we go and take things that we need to have fixed. And I know you could end up with this big pile of stuff that nobody wants, but I mean, it's a start, isn't it? Tool libraries where we can go and rent tools, loan them for the week, etc. It's just examples. Cooperative housing models that all operate within existing legal frameworks around fire regulations, etc. Now, they do exist, but they're largely being farmed out and given other certain groups are being given priority in those cooperatives, and the illusion that new developers, when they're building large estates, are meant to include a certain amount for communal housing or affordable housing. And at the end, they always scrap the idea because they say, oh, it's not viable, we can't cover the costs, and also we need to put units in there to recoup. So we need to be more strict around the development of large scale projects and having communal affordable housing as a kickback for the privilege of having the license to build and to generate capital. And so I'm not saying, it's important to add at this juncture as well, that I'm not saying that capitalism has to die, that we need to move into socialism or communism. No, they don't work. Certainly we don't need revolutions because they only really install a new group of people that run from the same systems. We need a hard boot of the system. We need a rewrite of the foundation, the operating system that the system sits on top of. And this is what I propose. All these things I propose, they don't fight the system. They reduce dependency on it. Every local loop closed is one less choke point controlled from above. I get it. This is boring on paper and devastatingly confirmatory in practice. So, the third principle, shift from employment to participation. Most systems demand stability before access. That's backwards. The lawful workaround is low barrier participation models. Cooperatives, mutual credit, time banking, profit sharing, micro enterprises, and peer-to-peer service exchanges. These aren't loopholes. They're underused legal forms that allow people to convert effort directly into sustenance without being crushed by compliance overhead designed for large corporations. Work should restore nervous systems, not destroy them. And the fourth principle, build parallel trust systems. When institutions fail, trust migrates. Lawful alternatives already exist. Community governance charters, transparent local decision making, rotating leadership, open ledger accounting, and reputation-based contribution systems. Excuse me. This isn't anti-government, it's pro-resilience. Central systems can remain in place while local ones absorb the shocks they're no longer fit to handle. And the fifth principle, use the system's own rules better than it does. Most people are excluded, not by law, but by complexity. The counter is literacy, understanding zoning exceptions, cooperative law, charitable status, mutual aid allowances, and small enterprise thresholds. Global systems thrive, they thrive on confusion. Clarity is a very lawful weapon. So, the bottom line, clean, searchable, learnable, tradable, the lawful way to provide basic needs as a birthright is not revolution. It's circumvention through alignment. Reduce dependency, don't provoke confrontation. Build local supply, not ideological opposition. Treat survival as infrastructure, not merit. Make systems optional again. When people can meet their basic needs without permission, the system doesn't collapse. It reforms by irrelevance. And that's how you counter the attack. Quietly, legally, effectively. Now, as a summary, in closing, how do we push back without breaking the law? The current system doesn't need overt force to control populations. It uses friction, fragmentation, and filtration. And of course, the systems that we have attempted to communicate with each other by. The replacement of turning up at the town hall and attending a meeting in favour of social networks and commentary and those that have a voice and a platform and a soapbox to speak from, getting their voice across. And meanwhile, those who have considered voices of dissension against a system that's not serving them are squashed down and not given that platform or that voice. And censorship isn't always a ban, but it's throttling. And congregation isn't outlawed, it's discouraged with the view to outlaw. You have to have a license to get together now, and you have to ask permission from authorizations that are there to serve us, the executive branch, i.e. the police and the legal framework and the insurance that we have to underwrite to, or have underwritten to be able to congregate. And this is this madness, and we're surveilled during the process, and that information is fed back into quantum computers ultimately, which build a case on us and targets us to shut us down before dissension becomes popular. And so algorithmically, we're buried. That is those that have a voice that want alternatives. But speech isn't illegal, but this is where we're heading to. Speech is delegated now. There are those who have that power at the top, which is imbalanced, that are choosing who gets to speak and who doesn't. You've heard of the term gatekeeper. So outsourcing to approved gatekeepers who speak about people rather than with them, the result is isolation by design. Again, game theory. And when people can't gather, compare experience, and pattern match their problems, systematic abuse stays invisible. Shared suffering becomes private shame. And private shame never becomes reform. And people tend to retreat and say, well, oh, it's not working, it will never change, and let me just get through my life. And in many cases, counting the days till they die. And in some cases, reducing that drastically by taking their own lives. And that's the end result of where this can take people as individuals. This is why online spaces are policed. Mainstream narratives are homogenized, and dissent is reframed as danger. Not because ideas are violent, but because collective clarity is destabilizing to misaligned systems. Misaligned systems that are dictatorial and narcissistic in many ways, and they gaslight anybody who speaks out against them. So how do we stop the slow creep of laws under the rule of law, which in some cases the gate's almost closed, that criminalize speech, restrict assembly, and punish narrative challenges? We do it in the same way. Durable change has always happened, inside the rules, but without asking permission. Again, let me say this, without asking permission. First, we normalise lawful congregation again. Small, decentralised, local interest-based groups, not rallies, not mobs, just people meeting, documented sharing experiences, and comparing notes. Systems fear scale. They are blind to networks. Second, we build parallel channels, not alternative platforms, in name only. Redundancy across formats, offline meetings, newsletters, long-form audio, peer-to-peer sharing, local notice boards, community records. And when communication can't be choked at a single point, censorship loses teeth. And third, we shift from opinion to evidence. Bring your receipts. Systems are legally vulnerable to patterns, not protests. Lived experiences logged consistently, calmly, and collectively become data. Hence the importance of diarising events that affect us. Data forces inquiries. Inquiries slow legislation. Slowed legislation saves freedoms. And fourth, we defend process, not personalities. Gatekeepers thrive when resistance is personalised and emotional. Process-based challenges, due process, proportionality, and transparency, along with necessity, are harder to smear and easier to defend in law. Fifth, we become literate, fast. Most gagging laws pass because people don't understand them until after the fact. Early scrutiny, plain language, issues before they harden into enforcement. Let me just rephrase that. Early scrutiny, plain language, breakdowns, and local discussion turn technical updates into public issues before they harden into enforcement. And finally, we refuse the final force binary. This is not order versus chaos. It is accountability versus silence. A system that cannot be questioned without punishment is not stable. It is brittle. The goal is not uprising, the goal is alignment. When people are allowed to gather, speak, and share truthfully, systems correct themselves. When they aren't, pressure builds elsewhere. History is unambiguous on this point. So, the lawful path forward is clear. Reconnect people, preserve speech through redundancy, document reality, don't shout about it, challenge laws early, calmly, collectively, make suppression expensive and transparency unavoidable. That's how you stem the tide. Without breaking the law, without feeding the narrative, and without waiting for permission from systems that no longer serve. Quiet coordination beats loud rebellion every time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. And next up, we'll be on episode 0003. And maybe we'll talk about this more depth. But as is always with Sorkin talking, we are just figuring it out as we go along. And that's okay. Pleasure having you here. Thanks if you stayed this long to listen. You are valuable. You are worthy. Thank you for listening. Catch you later.